Hello, my name is Glen Bauer, Professor Emeritus in the Department of Music at Webster University, and I'm here to give you a little preview of Rossini's The Barber of Seville, which is being performed by Union Avenue Opera this summer. This is an exciting opera and it should be a very exciting production. What I want to share with you is a little bit of background on Rossini and some of the music as well. So first, just a little bit about Rossini's life. His parents were both musical. He was born on the western coast of Italy at a rather difficult time of the Napoleonic Wars. The family moved to Bologna, where Rossini studied music and learned to play piano, viola, and cello. He was also supposedly a very good singer. So by 1809, he was working as a pianist, accompanying singers at theaters, and began writing his operas. His operas were written between 1810 and 1829. He wrote 39 operas, both opera buffa or comic operas and opera seria as well. It's a little bit mysterious why he quit writing operas in 1829, since he went on to live until 1868, though he did compose some other pieces later in his career. This is a portrait of the young Rossini. This is a more commonly seen photograph of Rossini. He was obviously a rather corpulent and portly fellow who enjoyed food. He was famous for his love of foie gras and of truffles as well. Yet one more picture of Rossini in his later years. These are some of the operas that he is known for. The Barber of Seville, you'll see, was written in 1816, so a relatively early work. Others that are very frequently performed these days are La Cenerentola and, of course, Guillaume Tell. Guillaume Tell was unusual, was his last opera. It was also written for the French opera, written in French, and was in some ways the beginning of French grand opera in the 19th century. His music had an enormous impact on the history of Italian opera in the 19th century. And I've listed here just some of his successors: Vincenzo Bellini, Gaetano Donizetti, and Giuseppe Verdi, all of whom followed in his footsteps and in many ways built upon the standards and the structures, the traditions that Rossini established. One of those things that he established was 19th century Italian opera structure. So it was a rather elaborate aria structure, often demanding considerable virtuosity, coloratura singing in a bel canto style, which we will hear in Rossini's Una voce poco fa from The Barber of Seville. But this Italian opera structure also included a number of sections. First, there would be a scene or scena with obbligato recitative, a tempo d'attacco, a kind of confrontational moment, and then the first part of the aria cantabile, lyrical, often slower in tempo, then a sudden tempo di mezzo, a change of mood, sometimes involving the arrival of interjection of another character or of the chorus, and then finally the cabaletta, the faster, more energetic section of the aria. So that was one of of Rossini's very important contributions. Now, when it comes to The Barber of Seville, it has an interesting history. The source of the story is Pierre-Augustin de Beaumarchais, a French writer and playwright from the 18th century. He actually wrote three plays based on these characters. The first is The Barber of Seville, completed in 1773. The second, The Marriage of Figaro from 1778. And the third, The Guilty Mother from 1792. It can be a little confusing because, of course, Mozart wrote his Marriage of Figaro in the 1780s, well before Rossini wrote The Barber of Seville. And yet, in terms of the chronology of the characters, The Barber of Seville actually deals with the early stages of the characters, whereas Mozart deals with them later on. So, in terms of the characters of the opera, we have our heroine, you might say, Rosina, who is the ward of Dr. Bartolo. She is an intelligent and clever young woman. Uh, she is the ward of Dr. Bartolo, and Dr. Bartolo uh, keeps very close tabs on her. It's clear that he intends to marry her himself because he wants to gain control of her inheritance, among other things. Our hero of the story, you might say, is Count Almaviva, also known as Lindoro. He is an aristocrat, an intelligent and clever young man. He's known as Lindoro because he has fallen in love with Rosina, but he doesn't want her to know that he's an aristocrat, so he pretends to be a poor young student named Lindoro. I've already mentioned Dr. Bartolo, a rather disagreeable old man, not very bright, but rather arrogant, as we will see. Then, of course, the very famous character of Figaro, the barber of Seville, who acts as kind of a go-between. He's very shrewd, witty, clever, and intelligent. And he is the only one who really knows who Count Almaviva is and what Count Almaviva's plans are. Then we have the rest of Dr. Bartolo's household, you might say, Berta, Dr. Bartolo's housekeeper and governess, and Don Basilio, who is Rosina's music teacher and a friend of Dr. Bartolo. So the it's a comedy, and like a lot of comedy, it has a lot of farcical aspects to it. The plot involves deception, hidden identity, intrigue, surprise revelations, and at time, certainly mayhem. Sorry. I want to play you a couple of musical examples. The first is a very famous aria, Una voce poco fa, for Rosina. This you might call her entrance aria. Introduces her character early in the first act. And so it conveys a lot about her character. In the right circumstances, she is docile and obliging, but she is clever and has a fiery spirit and will use her wits to do battle with anyone who crosses her. So in the music, we hear a lot of changing tempos, sentimental aspects, as well as sections full of forceful determination. So this is a performance by our Rosina, Janara Kellerman.
Qui nel cor mi risuonò il mio cor ferito è già e l'ignoro fu che il pianò se l'ignoro mio sarà non giurai la vincerò sì l'ignoro mio sarà non giurai la vincerò il tutto ricuserò io l'ingegno aguzzerò alla finza che temo e contento io resterò sì l'ingorno mio sarà lo giurai mi lascio reggere, mi fa guidar, mi fa guidar. Ma se mi tolgo dove il mio debole, sarò la vita, sarò. E cento trappole prima di cedere, farò giocare. E cento trappole prima di cedere, farò giocare. E cento trappole prima di cedere. E cento trappole farò giocare. Io sono docile, sono obbediente, mi lascio reggere, mi fa guidare. Ma se mi toccano dove il mio debole, sarò una vera sarò. E cento trappole prima di cedere, farò giocare. E cento trappole prima di cedere, farò giocare. E cento trappole prima di cedere. E cento trappole farò giocare. E cento trappole farò giocare. E cento trappole farò giocare.
So quite an extraordinary introduction to the character. She comes across as being sentimental and passionate, but also quite formidable as well. Entrance arias are very important because they give us kind of our orientation to the character, you might say. So Rossini's Barber of Seville is what we would call a number opera. So there are a number of numbers, which are arias, duets, trios, and so forth. And they are set off by sections of recitative in between. But there are also finales of the acts where there tends to be more continuous music with transitions between sections as the plot progresses, and the full cast of main characters and chorus often enter in as well. Our next musical example comes from Dr. Bartolo. And Dr. Bartolo is pompous. He is very confrontational with Rosina. He is trying to dominate and control her life, at times to the point of almost being abusive if he wasn't such a comical character. But his comical aspect comes out in this particular aria through patter rhythms, through the repetition of his vocal lines and so forth. Sung by Andy Papas.
Andar dalla mia sorte, queste scuse, signorina. Andar dalla mia sorte, queste scuse, signorina. Vi consiglio, mia carina, un po' meglio a imposturar, meglio, 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 meglio. Vi consiglio, mia carina, un po' meglio a imposturar, meglio, 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 meglio. Vi consiglio, mia carina, un po' meglio a imposturar, sì, sì. Vi consiglio, mia carina, un po' meglio a imposturar. A un dottor della mia sorte queste scuse, signorina. Vi consiglio, mia carina, un po' meglio a imposturar, un po' meglio a imposturar, un po' meglio a imposturar. Sì. Via carina, confessate, son disposto a perdonar. Non parlate, vi ostinate. Non parlate, vi ostinate. So ben io quel che ho da far, so ben io quel che ho da far. Signorina, volta quando batteranno fuori, signorina, volta quando batteranno fuori, la canzone vittoria sul modo va sparare. Signorina, volta quando batteranno fuori, signorina, volta quando batteranno fuori, la canzone vittoria sul modo va sparare. Ah, non sei fratello, suono, faccio pure la gatta morta, faccio pure la gatta morta. Cosa tomo quella porta del consumo, quella porta ne menai, tapperà, cosa tomo quella porta ne menai, tapperà. E Rosina innocentina, sconsolata, disperata, e non sembrano le smorfie, faccia pure la gatta morta, cosa tomo quella porta, ne menai, tapperà, e Rosina innocentina, sconsolata, disperata, in tua camera inserati, mica voglio stare. Un dottor della mia sorte non si lascia inginocchiar, no, no. Un dottor della mia sorte non si lascia inginocchiar. E Rosina innocentina, sconsolata, disperata, in tua camera serrata, finché voglio star dovrà, finché voglio star dovrà. Finché voglio star dovrà, sì, finché voglio star dovrà, finché voglio star dovrà, di star dovrà, di star dovrà, di star dovrà.
So, wonderful performance there, a wonderful piece of music. One of the things that's characteristic of a lot of Rossini's music is that the emphasis is often on the vocal line rather than on the orchestral accompaniment. So the vocal line often has brilliant coloratura passages, a real bel canto style, or very comic patter kind of style. The orchestra is always there offering support, but the emphasis very much tends to be on the vocal parts. The orchestral accompaniment is sometimes rather deliberately simple and sparse. However, that is not true in, of course, Rossini's overtures, for which he is very famous. Well, this has just been an introduction. There's so much more to the opera. There's, of course, Figaro's famous aria, Largo al Factotum. There are extraordinary finales where the entire cast becomes involved. But I hope this gives you a little taste of what you might expect. And thank you very much for listening to my preview.